Mary Kay Letourneau, an American elementary school teacher. Being our teacher in our society is really revered, even if arguably underpaid. It's a position of respect and heroism, as reflected in different famous literature. As quoted by Albert Einstein, it is the supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy in creative expression and knowledge. Poet William Butler Yeats, considered one of the greatest poets of the 20th century, declared this: education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. After all, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela. And finally, it takes a big heart to help shape little minds. Author unknown. Mary Kay Letourneau was born a California girl. She grew up as one of 6 children in a devout Catholic family in Orange County. Her father was a politician. He served as a state senator and a one-term congressman. He even replaced George Wallace as the presidential candidate for American Independent Party in 1972. And Mary Kay's mother was a happy homemaker who was active in anti-feminist causes. Letourneau was an attractive blonde, slight and delicate-looking, with a girlish voice and a demure manner. She was described as bright, pretty, and charming, and one who made friends easily. She graduated high school and then moved to enroll in Arizona State University. There, she fell in love with a fellow student, the handsome Steve Letourneau. The two got married in 1984 and had 4 children together. During her marriage to Steve, they moved to Seattle, and Mary Kay started her career teaching for the Highline School District, where, by all accounts, she had an exemplary record. She received glowing evaluations during her annual performance reviews, and parents raved about her ability to teach their children. There was a steady waiting list of students for her class, and she was clearly a beloved, sought-after teacher. But the beloved teacher would soon turn egregious child abuser of a student, of an elementary school student. The sin? Lust. Lust is defined as a very strong sexual desire, a strong craving for sex. A person can also have a lust for power or material things, but in its moral and spiritual usages, lust typically refers to sexual activities. This is the why behind the crime, the motive. I'm Ashley Willcott. I'm a court TV anchor, a judge, a trial lawyer, and I would say almost all of the cases that I've covered over the years intersect with one of the deadly sins: pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. The opposite of the 7 heavenly virtues, temptations that, taken too far, turn deadly. This week, we break down the case of Mary Kay Letourneau and how the deadly sin of lust turned this teacher treacherous. A little later, I am joined by a very well-known attorney, Bernarda Villalona, where we go deep on the how and the why of one of the most disturbing cases of child rape. Let's get into it. This is the Deadly 7. In the fall of 1991, Letourneau was a happy wife, mother, and well-thought-of teacher in the Highland School District Elementary School. One of her second grade students, Vili Fualaau, was bright-eyed and eager to learn. But he was from a troubled family. Letourneau was fond of this student and introduced him to the piano, bought him some art supplies, and otherwise encouraged what she saw as his natural artistic abilities. In fact, after the 2nd grade, she continued to mentor him. And in 1997, she told the Seattle Times this: "There was a respect, an insight, a spirit, an understanding between us that grew over time. Fualaau's home life was chaotic and sometimes violent. He and his 3 older siblings were raised by a single mother who worked very long hours at a bakery to support them. He barely knew his father, who was often in prison, who fathered 18 children with 5 different women. Vili described watching pornographic movies with his great-grandfather. It was how we live, he later testified. In 1996, Fualaau returned to Letourneau's classroom, but this time in the 6th grade. And at this time, Letourneau's family life was not as stable as it once had been. Her marriage was faltering, she'd recently suffered a miscarriage, and her father was diagnosed with cancer. 12-year-old Vili began to occupy more and more of her time and attention. He would often stay late in her classroom, and she would bring him dinner. She'd also frequently invite him to spend the night with her family at her house. The teacher even took him on a family trip to Alaska, and then began her descent into the criminal behavior of a child perpetrator. According to Vili's later testimony, she became increasingly flirtatious with him, once even offering to strip off an article of clothing for every answer he got right on his history test. At 12 years old, he became deeply infatuated. In fact, he found a sterling silver ring on the street and gave it to her and asked her to marry him. He testified that she took off her husband's ring and put mine on. She wore it every day at school, except when her husband would come around. It didn't take long for this teacher's flirtation to turn to sex. Fualaau later told police that he and Letourneau first had sex in June of 1996 when he was still only 12 years old. They went in her house. Her husband had just left for work, and her 4 children were in the house asleep at the time. That same month, police discovered the 2 in the back of her minivan at a marina late at night. They insisted to the police, no, there's no improper conduct. And when law enforcement called Vili's mother, she said he could go home with Mary Kay. By that September, when Fualaau started the 7th grade, Letourneau was pregnant with his first child. And it was not until February of the next year that Letourneau's husband realized she was having a sexual relationship, an inappropriate sexual relationship with her own student. The husband found some love letters that she had written to Vili, and eventually Child Protective Services was notified. On March 4th of 1997, Mary Kay Letourneau was arrested and charged with 2 counts of second-degree child rape. She was allowed to remain free on bond, pregnant with her victim's child. Her other 4 children that she had with Steve, her husband, the father of those 4 children, they ranged in ages 3 to 12, and they were actually sent to live with relatives in Washington, D.C. On August 7th of 1997, Letourneau pled guilty to 2 counts of child rape, although she continued to insist her relationship with her very underage student was romantic and consensual, not predatory. In fact, Vili's own mother said she'd forgiven Mary Kay, and she hoped others would too, as she's just a human being who made a terrible mistake. She also asked that Letourneau receive treatment and not jail time as his sentence. During the sentencing hearing, a psychiatrist reported that Letourneau suffered from bipolar disorder, which contributed to her reckless behavior. The psychiatrist and the judge agreed that with medication, Letourneau would be a good candidate for sex offender treatment. She was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, but all but 6 months of that was suspended on this condition: that she enter treatment, take medication as prescribed, and, among other conditions, not have any contact with Fualaau. A tearful Letourneau promised the judge she would not have anything more to do with the boy. Morally or legally, it was wrong. I give you my word that it won't happen again. Please help me. Help us all. Almost immediately upon release, though, Letourneau began seeing Fualaau. And within less than a month, police found her with him. He was now 14 years old at 2:40 a.m. in a car with steamed-up windows, 1 block from where she was staying. She was arrested. She was sent back to jail. She was sentenced to serve that suspended sentence, 7.5 years. And now she was pregnant with their second child, another daughter. Fualaau continued to suffer as a victim of her abuse. At 15 years old, he dropped out of high school. He struggled with substance abuse, and he struggled with depression. He and his mother sued the school district and a local police department seeking liability for damages caused to him by the criminal actions of his abuser. They lost that civil lawsuit in 2002, while his mother had received custody of the 2 children that he fathered with Letourneau. As of 2004, Fualaau was unemployed and was only receiving small amounts of money that he would receive for telling his story to tabloids and talk shows. In spite of the abuse and the continuing trauma, he told King TV on the day before her final release from prison, "I don't know what my feelings are right now, but I know that I do love her." After she was released from prison, she and Fualaau were married in 2005 and raised their daughters together until 2017. They were separated, but then he was by her side when she died in 2020 from colon cancer. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce a very well-known attorney. You may have seen her on lots of different outlets, Bernarda Villalona, who is a seasoned attorney, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, joining us to talk about Mary Kay Letourneau. I first want to say this, Bernarda. You know me, all things child welfare, child abuse get me going. It's so hard to fathom. It's so hard to understand. I've spent my career working on child welfare, and yet it never makes sense. And in this case, you've got the 7 deadly sins, lust. But lust I typically think of as a sexual desire for a consenting adult. This certainly is not a consenting adult. We know that Mary Kay started having sex with her student when Vili, was only 12 years old, but actually she started developing a relationship with him as a student when he was in the 2nd grade in her class. When I say developing a relationship, I think what I mean is grooming him, because she's a child predator, and we know child predators groom their victims. I think it started in 2nd grade. But I want to bring you in to talk about, first of all, how this even happens in your mind, how you start when you have, and now she's a convicted felon for child rape, 2 counts. How does this even start or happen?
Ashley, thank you for having me. See, it's these types of cases that always leaves me with so many more questions, because you can't rationalize these type of cases. I was a prosecutor for 16 years, and when I first started out as a prosecutor, within 2 years of me being a prosecutor, I started prosecuting sexual cases, and sexual cases having to deal with minors. And Ashley, I was so traumatized by it that within 6 months, I had to ask to be transferred to another unit, because the majority of the cases having to deal with kids, because we're talking about kids here. The kids that I was prosecuting were under the age of 15 years old. And as a woman, as a person who has nieces and nephews and grew up in a big family, you can't fathom how an adult can take advantage of a young child, because that's what we're talking about here. A 12-year-old kid that, let's be real, we don't know if it started earlier than that, because according to her own statements that she's given, is that she met this child when he was only in the second grade. And actually, let's take it a step further. This woman was married with 4 kids. Her oldest child was 12 years old, just 1 year older or younger than Vili here. So exactly what was going on in her mind? These are the scary cases, because this can be the person that's walking next to you, that's in your class, that you're working with, and you can't see any signs that this person is a pedophile, is a predator, and is targeting young kids.
And she's in a position of power over these
Yes,
children. She's a
yes.
teacher. It should be a position of trust. And a lot of predators do this. They put themselves in a position of trust. The parents trust because she's a teacher. The kids trust because she's a teacher. And that was what she did. And that's, it adds insult to injury. It's like you just abuse a position where people should be able to trust you. She'd gotten great reviews by parents. Parents loved her as a teacher. She got great reviews by the school during her annual performance reviews. And so here you have this person that, by all accounts, should be someone who can be trusted. And at the time, this was really big news when it hit the media in 1997, because she was a woman. And typically, it's unusual, I should say, for a woman to commit these crimes. And it's unusual, like you said, for a woman who's married with 4 kids to then have a relationship that's inappropriate with her student. And when we think about it, Bernarda, the other piece of it that really bothers me is that afterwards they end up together. They both say they're in love. Well, of course he says he's in love.
Mhm.
He didn't know what love is because of the abuse that he endured at her hands. So I can't hold that against him. I can't look at him and say, oh, he didn't know he's talking. No. He's a victim. She caused this in him. He doesn't know what love is. She, on the other hand, to say, no, it's romantic, I'm in love with him. They married after she got out of prison. They were married for years. They had 2 children they raised together. That's the mental part that I just can't understand, that she could never see or accept that she was a perpetrator, a criminal. Instead, she paints it as this romanticism and, oh, but I love him. What about that piece?
Actually, what's crazy? Because Vili here came from a broken home. And coming from a broken home, for kids, usually the person that is stable in your life and where you look at and look up to is a teacher, right? A teacher or a principal is the people that are in school, because they're looking out for you, because what you have at home, unfortunately, it's broken. It's broken, and not a good role model or support or love or caring. So she took that position, and that position completely jaded him, molded him to not even be able to grow up, not being able to know what is love or what is the proper relationship, because you took those early years away from him. I think this is something that is psychological that will constantly affect him for the rest of his life, Vili. I mean, of course, he's an adult now. He ended up marrying her, and they had those 2 kids. And ultimately, Mary Kay Letourneau did pass away a few years ago. But still, this is something that has affected him his entire life. It's like, where do you go from here? I mean, we do know this story. I remember this story. I was in college when this story actually broke, and I was like, oh my God, this is some crazy, crazy things that are happening here. How is this even possible? But actually, to your point, when she gives her interviews, she never saw anything wrong with it. The only time that she ever exercised some kind of remorse was to her own benefit at the time of sentencing, when she was asking for leniency, for the judge to cut her a break and saying that this will never happen again. So the judge ends up sentencing her to, yes, to 7.5 years, but 7 of those years suspended. So she does less than 6 months and then is released again. So that's the only time that you hear any type of remorse. or saying that she knew what she was doing was wrong. Because after that, her action says something completely different. Because even from jail during that time, she was still in contact with this 12-year-old, this 13-year-old kid.
Yeah, liar, liar, pants on fire. I don't believe her at all when she said it. You are right. That's what she said to the judge. I'm not ever going to have any contact with him again. I don't believe her for a minute because she did the exact opposite. And then she did serve her time. But lust to me is all this is about. I think it's very simple. I think it boils down to, and I would see it again and again and again on the bench, and that is if people want something, if they are attracted to someone and they have that desire to have them sexually, they do it. And I think that's what she did. I think it boils down to she was attracted to him. She was lustful and she decided to do something about it. She didn't care his age. She didn't care his vulnerability. She didn't care that he would be a victim. She didn't care about any of that. She lusted after Vili and she therefore decided she would have him. And she did everything in her power to have him, destroying her own marriage. I'm sure destroying a relationship with her own children that she had with Steve, her husband, destroying her life, her career, going to prison, and none of that made a difference. She still lusted after him after she got out of the treatment program to get pregnant by him again, to have that second child and then go back to jail. When lust is this powerful, this is why I like tying the motive to the 7 deadly sins, because I see it time and time and time again. I believe the lust was so powerful in this case, she didn't care what crimes she committed. At the end of the day, she was going for it because she was attracted to this child.
Absolutely. So, it begs the question, Judge Ashley, in this criminal justice system that we have, it's like, does the punishment fit the crime and whether she was ever rehabilitated? Because she ended up doing the 7.5 years. And still, after doing that sentence, she was still having these same feelings and these same desires and was acting out on these same intentions. So it's like, what do you do with sexual predators then? Is the criminal justice system actually working when it comes to sexual predators such as Mary Kay Letourneau? How do you deter this type of conduct? How do you stop it from happening? So that's the question that has always existed. Because even though she was sentenced and she served her full time of those 7.5 years, you still had her with the same old feelings.
Yeah, and I agree with you that it is something to think about, our criminal justice system and rehabilitation, which is one of the goals. I don't believe child perpetrators can be rehabilitated
I
at
agree.
all, ever,
I agree.
right? I don't think it's possible. And so I do think it's something for consideration that I can say the system as it's set up can't help them because they're not helpable. I saw time and time and time again when they would, for instance, a parent would be sexually abusing one of their own biological children in their home. And Bernarda, it probably doesn't surprise you to learn that it would be a targeted child, right?
Yes.
But guess what? If you remove that targeted child, they would find another target. They would do it again to someone else. I don't think there's any discretion. I don't believe she wouldn't have done this again to someone else. Maybe it would have been only him. But in the alternative, I think if she met a child she was attracted to, she would have gone after that person as well.
Absolutely, because she didn't see age. In her mind, she did not see age. And she, up until a point of death, she always said that she doesn't believe that she did anything that was wrong. So that her relationship was special, that it was different, that they loved each other. So she didn't believe that she did anything wrong that was a crime itself. So when you can't get that through a person, then there's no type of deterrence. There's no type of rehabilitation. There's nothing that the system can do aside from lock them up for life in order to prevent this from happening.
Yeah.
It's scary.
So
it's scary.
It's scary. And let me tell you, one of the reasons I wanted to do this case with you today, former prosecutor, it was significant to me. You are a very well-known defense attorney. You go after it. You're zealous. And I mean that in the best way. And so in talking about that, I want to bring to your attention a bond hearing that I covered yesterday. And this is in New Jersey. And this is for a teacher, female. Guess what she's charged with? Having sex with an 11-year-old student. 11. Bernarda, 11. That's even worse, having sex with an 11-year-old student. And what's interesting, and you probably know more about this than I do in New Jersey, I know you're not in New Jersey, but it's close to where you are. The bail reform system is in place in New Jersey. And so you can either stay in jail or be released on bond. There's no cash bail system there currently. And as a result, during this bond hearing, the state argued she was a danger to society because they said, clearly this is something that makes all children vulnerable because she will do this again. Let me stop there and get your thoughts and then give you the spoiler alert of what the judge did in that case. What are your thoughts about that case?
And that's exactly what we've been talking about, Judge Ashley, is that when it comes to sexual predators and perpetrators, is that it's very difficult to try to confine them, to stop them from acting against someone else, because it's something that's all taking place in their mind and the way that they're thinking, or as some will say, the way that they're wired. So how do you protect society from that? Especially because it's something that can happen in this day and age. Let's make a comparison. So with Mary Kay Letourneau, we're talking about in the 90s, barely internet, cell phones, text messages, social media. That's back then. And she was able to capture little Vili. But now when we're talking about this New Jersey case, we're talking about all this social media access, this internet access, where you can have so much contact with anyone. You can be online and have like a face that you're 15 or 12 years old, just like these other kids. That's why the prosecution does make these arguments even much more forceful now, because we're in this age of AI and of internet and social media and just so much easy access than back in the 90s.
Gosh, that's a really great point, that easy access. But interesting, in spite of the easy access, I think this is the problem with child perpetrators who are convicted, in my opinion. Even with easy access, what do? They find the kids that are in their life because of their current position of trust. This one in New Jersey, again, a teacher, there are allegations against her. It was a bond hearing. She hasn't been convicted of anything. The allegations are pretty bad. But again, a teacher with a student. Let me ask you this. If Mary Kay was a man, do you really believe that he would have gotten 6 months with a suspended sentence to do treatment and get back out? Would he have gotten the same treatment?
Absolutely not.
Not.
Absolutely
You would
not.
have been thrown away and the key thrown away.
Absolutely.
I have no doubt in my mind. Yeah, tell me.
No doubt. I have no doubt that if Mary Kay Letourneau was a man and Vili was a little girl, a 12-year-old girl, a 13-year-old girl, there is no way that the judge would have gave a suspended sentence of doing the 6 months and just don't get in any trouble, and then you're off scot-free. Absolutely not. He would have been doing at least 3 or 5 years in jail, right from the top, even with no criminal record.
And she should have been. And for me, she should have done that. She should have had to have served that time. That's what I believe. Because again, I don't believe that child perpetrators can be rehabilitated or cured. There's no medicine. There's no pill. You can try treatment, but I don't believe it sticks. I don't believe it works. I don't believe it's
Judge Ashley, how about even this? Because even with sexual predators now, you have to register as a sex offender. But what does that do, really? So now the onus is on the people in the community. Let me constantly look up online and see if I have a sexual predator by me. Okay, what does that do? Oh, okay, Billy, I don't want you in contact, or you can't be around this person. But with this day and age, with internet, with social media and all the cell phones, that does nothing.
Yeah, it does nothing. When we moved into this house, I had 1 kid now, and then now I have 3. But at the time, I did that. I did exactly what you're saying. You can look up, as you well know, anybody who's on the sex abuse registry in your state and where they live. They have to register if they actually follow that law. And you can tell where they live. And I did that. But here's all I could think is, okay, so that takes care of those on the registry. What about those who haven't been caught yet? What about the coaches? What about the teachers? All of those people. And again, I think a woman should be treated exactly the same as a man would be if they are convicted of this type, in this case, child rape. And yet that didn't happen. So now, fast forward to the New Jersey case, the bond hearing that happened yesterday. Spoiler alert, not a spoiler alert at this point because it's already been announced, the judge let her out on bond.
Hmm. I'm not
The judge,
surprised.
well, okay, why are you not? I am. This day and age, I am. Why is she out on bond? Because of the allegations of having sex with an 11-year-old. To me, she clearly is a threat to society, which is one of the grounds under
Yes.
which she should have to stay in jail. Why are you not surprised?
It's bail reform. That's why it's the new bail reform laws. That's why, Judge Ashley, this day and age, unfortunately, or sometimes fortunately, depending on the case, where number one, it's forcing the judges to lean on the side of release as opposed to remand or setting some kind of bond. So because there has been a large change within recent years, that's why you have so many more people that have been arrested for felonies that are being released on their own recognizance or on a bond. They are not being remanded. In fact, you rarely see at this point people actually being remanded or some kind of bond being set because of how bail reform has developed within the last few years. And also what judges want to tell you and the state legislature. Also, judges, sometimes their hands are tied because of these new bail reform laws. Their hands are tied. And again, they're going to focus that, look, these are merely allegations. She hasn't been convicted. She hasn't had a trial. These are just allegations that the whole purpose of any type of securing order or any type of bond is to secure that that person will appear at each of the court dates, not to actually have them sentenced before they have actually had a trial.
And I'm so grateful that you know about bail reform and the details of it. And you're right, the judge has to apply the law to the facts as presented to the court. I'm still surprised this woman got out. Let me tell you a few more facts. Her name's Laura Karen. She's 35. She's a middle school teacher for this 11-year-old that she allegedly had a sexual relationship with. Here are the charges she faces: aggravated sexual assault, and endangering the welfare of a child. She also has a child from this alleged relationship with this 11-year-old. I just go on and on and on because I just can't get over the fact she got out. So going back to Mary Kay and this woman as well, this woman, let me ask you this. With the bail reform, if she were a man and the 11-year-old was a girl that he allegedly had a relationship with, do you believe he also would have been released yesterday?
I think the judge would have probably found some other grounds to actually have some bond set. Um, I don't think it would have been so quick for the man to have been released as how the female was actually released. I think the judge probably would have still found something. But again, still the law leans towards having a person released.
Yeah, but I would still argue they're a threat to society forevermore. Now, both of these cases, Mary Kay, they had 2 children with Vili. Fortunately, Vili's mother, the paternal grandmother, was in a position to have custody of both of the children because he was still a minor. And so she had legal custody while Letourneau was in jail serving her 7 years that she had to go back and serve. And so there was family who could step in and help raise those children until she got out. The 2 of them then married, raised the children themselves. But I just think about the trauma that those children then suffer or go through. What do you think it must be like for them to say, oh, yeah, my father was 13 when he had me. My mother was his teacher. Then she went to jail. Then she's out of jail. Same with the case yesterday. Allegedly, the child, who was 11 at the time the sexual relationship started, is the father of the now 1-year-old. And again, that 1-year-old's going to say, well, we'll see if she's convicted or not. But if she's convicted, Karen is going to be in jail, arguably. And my father, he was 13 when I was born, and he was having an affair with my mother. Well, it wasn't an affair with, let me go back to, he's a victim. But I think these children of these illicit, illegal relationships also are going to suffer trauma and have a lot of issues as a result of their circumstances.
Absolutely. And that's exactly, Judge Ashley, what the prosecutor argues at sentencing, exactly how these kids are going to be traumatized. That the person that they had a child with is not only just a victim, but also the child is the victim as well, where they will be looked down upon in society, where people will be able to Google their name. And when they tell their story of what their upbringing is and where they come from, that these are their parents. This is what happened. But also, Judge Ashley, what I wanted to say though, in terms of all of this, when you look at it, what's also sad about it is that there's no running away from it. There's no running away from it. So while the bad thing, of course, is that a child resulted as a result of this relationship, the good thing about it as a prosecutor, it actually makes the case stronger as a prosecutor, because you can't deny that you didn't have sexual intercourse with this minor because a child resulted as a result of the sexual intercourse that you had with this minor. So all you have to do is just get DNA results along with some other testimony, and you can easily prove your case. So yes, it is bad that they had a child, but the one good silver lining out of it is that it makes the case stronger for the prosecutor in presenting this case to a jury. That's why Mary Kay Letourneau, she had to plead guilty. She had the person's child, Vili's child. So it was easy to be able to prove that there was sexual intercourse with this minor. Same thing with this woman from New Jersey. It's going to be easy. So it's going to result in a plea, because to go to trial, it's like 12 jurors are not going to acquit you or try to come down onto the lower charge. They're going to find you guilty. I mean, there's just no way around it. You can put 12 jurors inside of the jury box, random people, and you won't have jury nullification. The prosecutor's going to be able to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, talk about best evidence. The kid is the best evidence. But, I could get on a tangent about birth control, because here they are victimizing these young
Right.
kids.
Yes.
And then choosing to get pregnant. I'm sorry,
Yes.
that's a choice, right? There are ways to prevent pregnancy. They're not choosing to do that. They're choosing to be lustful after these kids and have babies with them. That just the whole next level. As a prosecutor, if an 11, 12, 13-year-old makes a statement and says with details, this teacher had sex with me, and here are the details, like Mary Kay, it was in her house, her husband left from work, and the kids were home asleep. Do you believe that child? As a former prosecutor, when you were prosecuting cases, would you believe the child?
So, Judge Ashley, when it comes to these sexual cases, you always look at it, and you have to look at everything, right? You have to look at corroborating factors, because in the end, when these cases come to you on face value, like, oh, yes, the person did it, but it's not about what you think or what you feel. It's what you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. So you're always looking for corroboration. And Judge Ashley, the cases where you don't have the corroboration in the sense of there's no physical evidence in terms of DNA or in terms of was a rape kit conducted, and you're left with the word of the child, that's what makes those cases so difficult to prosecute. You want to argue that why will this child make it up? But then again, when you're looking at, for example, with Mary Kay, and you're looking with Vili came from a broken home. So the defense will probably try to tear him up if it would have gone to trial, with the exception of it didn't happen because he ended up getting pregnant and having a child by him. So there was no way that you could have judged his credibility and say that he's lying, because you had the proof right there, the DNA proof. So that's why, in terms of what I said, in terms of what made the case stronger for the prosecutors, is the birth of the children of these two different women is what helped the prosecution, because it's really hard when you're just dealing with the words of a young child. Because another thing, remember, Judge Ashley, when it comes to prosecuting these cases, that depending on the age of the child, you have to have a hearing to see whether the child can actually be able to take the oath and understand the oath that you have to tell the truth when you're testifying. So age does become an issue because of the age itself and the understanding of taking the oath and dealing with credibility, and also the difference between a truth and a lie, depending on the age. These are all different things that you have to deal with.
Yeah, child witnesses are tough. And then at the end of the day, if the case goes to trial, that child can be required to testify, which is traumatic for any child. So there are a lot of considerations, I know, as a prosecutor on a case. But with Vili, sometimes I would say, and experts would say, part of the reason we find this child witness credible is because of the details they were able to provide about specific instances or knowledge at 11 or 13 or in second grade about sexual things. But with Vili, remember, he said in his history that when he was growing up, they would watch pornography with a great-grandfather. That's just the way it was. And so that teaches them a lot about sexual things so they can describe in great detail things that they shouldn't be able to describe. So there are a lot of steps. Forensic interviews. Those are interviews that are done by law enforcement, appropriately trained, specific personnel, law enforcement that know how to do a proper forensic interview of a child. No leading questions, making them comfortable, sitting at eye level, things so that the child can feel comfortable telling the truth, and then having a credible statement that can be used in a prosecution that follows. I have to tell you this exercise. It just gets your thoughts because, boy, what it hit home. And that is someone said to a group of people at a conference, I want everyone to close their eyes. If you're not comfortable doing that, look down at a place on the floor. Just don't look at anyone. And they walked them through vividly remembering their last consensual good sexual experience, who they were with, where they were, what they were wearing, what happened next, what they did, the intimate details. So with their eyes closed, they were supposed to envision this really good, positive, great experience, right? And then they said, now open your eyes. We want you to turn to the person to your right and tell that person every single detail of what you were just thinking. And of course, everybody laughs. It was like, no, thank you. I'm not going to share that. But they said, okay, now imagine you're a child and it wasn't consensual. It was by an adult. And you have to say every single detail because that's what it's like to testify or to have a forensic interview and have to tell every single detail more than once of what you experienced. Talk about a powerful perspective on a piece of what it might feel like to be in that position as a child victim.
Absolutely. And that's something that you would tell the jury as well when you're arguing your case to them, doing closing arguments, just try to explain probably how the child testified and why they testified the way they did and how things evolved during the investigation of the case as well.
Yeah, it is powerful to think about what children go through who are victims of any type of abuse, but even more powerful to see so often their resilience, their ability to testify, their ability to tell someone it happened in the first place. All of those things are tributes to these children. I stand by Vili was a victim, is a victim, has been a victim. He doesn't know what love is. Bob Bianchi, who you may know, said yesterday to me, he said that he prosecuted a case that was similar where a teacher and was convicted of abusing a child. And the child said during sentencing, I didn't know if she was my mother, my teacher, my mentor, my lover, my wife. I didn't know what she was to me. And that's the problem. Let me get your final thoughts on this case. And you're an incredible expert, and I have so much respect for everything you do every day as a current criminal defense attorney.
Judge Ashley, scary. These cases are scary. These cases are scary, and you don't want to live where you're scared to have your child around just anyone, your next door neighbor, or you're even a family member. But unfortunately, it's cases like this. When I was younger, my mom wouldn't allow us to sleep outside the house. We weren't allowed to go to friends' houses. We weren't even allowed to spend the night at family houses. And I could never understand why. But it wasn't until I became a prosecutor and started working on these sexual assault and rape cases that I understood why he had this rule. Because you just never know what is in the mind of a sexual predator. And there's no stopping them. So we just have to remain vigilant of our children.
words to live by. Hug our children. If you see something, say something. If someone tells you something is going on, believe it, report it, and let everybody else who has the expertise sort out whether or not it's accurate. All right.
And have the conversation. And also, Judge Ashley, have the conversation with your child. Unfortunately, we have to explain them. Like, what are nice touches, where somebody shouldn't be touching you, the different names of where they shouldn't be touching you. And you have to do this from a young age because you just never know. Because sometimes the child does not know that what's happening to them is wrong. And I experienced that a lot as a prosecutor dealing with very young victims. I mean, young, under the age of 5, that they just didn't know what was happening to them was wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, when my kids were very young, I was doing child welfare work. I was involved in this intimately, a judge pro tem at the time on the bench listening to these cases. And I did it very young with my kids. And if people wonder, well, what's child appropriate? What do you say? There are a lot of books that can tell you. You can actually read those books because they tell you how to say it in language that the child will understand that's not more traumatizing, but to teach them to always be vigilant and aware. To your point, really great words to live by. Hug your children, educate your children. Thank you for continuing to fight the battle. Appreciate you as always. Great to have you on.
Thank you, Judge Ashley.